This is To the Front. Tools for today's top agents.
All right, welcome back. Episode number 15 of To the Front. Can you believe 15 episodes in? And hopefully you are still with us, because this podcast is all about helping captive agents or small business owners do what they do better. So hopefully you found value in this. You've bookmarked it. You subscribed on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get it from. Hopefully it's a valuable part of your week. This is part number 2 of a topic that we started last week called How You Practice, or How You Train is How You Play. And hopefully you were able to listen to part number 1, because we talked about setting up an incredible atmosphere for a new employee, a new team member. And then we talked about having a training plan when they show up. And maybe if you're having a tough time keeping and retaining team members, could it be that you just need to have a little bit more intentionality when you bring people on to your team? But today's episode is going to be part number 2, and I think it's going to be the most important part about helping team members to adapt quickly to your office. And this episode's really going to be focused towards captive insurance agents. So if you own another business that is not an insurance, I'll be honest, this may not be the episode for you, and that's okay. Come back and check us episode number 16, because it'll definitely apply to you. But this episode really is for captive agents. And the second part of the topic of how you train is how you play, or how you practice is how you play, is all about helping your team members make their first big win easy. Think about that. Think about that new job that you started, and that first time you got the big sale, or the first time that you got applauded in front of a lot of people. Or maybe it was that relationship, and the first big win was getting him to give you a kiss. And do you remember that feeling when you walked away from that date and you're like, I landed it? You know that feeling of a first big win. It gives you confidence. It makes you feel like you can do anything. And I want to tell you that a key to your team member success is helping them to get their first big win easy, to make it really, really easy. And so, hey, to bring on, to talk about this topic, I want to bring on my friend Mike Aldini. Mike, welcome to the show. How you doing today?
Adam, I'm doing good. Good to see you.
Good.
Thanks
Welcome.
for having me.
Absolutely. Mike is, I'm going to introduce Mike here in just a second, but before I introduce Mike, I want to tell you what that first big win is. That first big win for captive agents is getting your team licensed. And so today we're going to help you to make that really easy, because maybe in your office that's been a struggle. But before I get there, let me introduce Michael. And Michael is the VP of Strategic Accounts at Excel Solutions. And so Michael and his team are helping companies, agencies all over the nation get their team members licensed. And so Michael and I have known each other for a couple of years, but really connected, Mike, last month at Soaring Eagle. And we just started talking about how he and his team are helping agencies. And I said, boy, I got to get Mike on the show to talk about making their first win easy, talk about all things team member licensing. So, Michael, you want to add anything to that? I do okay?
Yeah, no, that was perfect. I appreciate it. It's a nice intro, and I'm looking forward to trying to help some people work through licensing. I think it can be pretty intimidating at times, especially for new students new to the insurance world. So it'll be nice to kind of peel it back a little bit and shed some light on some areas where managers can kind of help these students tackle what sometimes is a pretty intimidating subject for them. So
I 100% agree. I've got some horror stories to even share today of just the licensing process just going crazy. Now, Mike, remind me, you were in Arizona, so it's pretty early in the morning for you.
Actually, I'm in Southern California. I'm in San Diego area, so a little bit earlier even.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I thought you were in Arizona. You're in southern San Diego, which is beautiful. I remember us talking about that.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm from Arizona originally, so lived
You're
there a majority of my
from
life, and then relocated to a couple different spots after that. But right now I'm in San Diego. So
in San Diego. So how's the weather in San Diego? Good.
let's not talk about it. People are going to be watching this from some other places that aren't necessarily as nice right now, but it's pretty good. So
Yeah, it's snowing out my window, so I don't want to talk about it. Talk about it either. Okay, let's talk about insurance licensing. Let's talk about getting those team members licensed. I've got a really good friend who had a team member one time, and she took her licensing test like 8 times. And by the end of it, her phrase was, well, she had gotten she was like 2% off from passing. She goes, well, I basically passed. And he looks at her and he says, well, no, you can't basically pass anything. You either pass or you fail. And so he's been a captive agent for a lot of years, and some of his team members get licensed pretty quickly. Some of it takes a little bit longer, but it's always sort of the first nervous point for a team member. And so I'm sure that you've talked to frustrated agents who have been in different places with getting their team members licensed. So I guess I want to open up and just ask you a question. Why do you think that's such a stressful time for a new team member to get licensed? I know you work in this all day, so
yeah.
tell me what's your thoughts on why is that so stressful for a new team member?
I think there's a number of factors, right? A lot of them really fall to the student or team member. I think some of it has to do with you just don't know what their situation is outside of work. And they're
Yeah.
trying to come into a new job, and this new job is contingent in a lot of cases on them getting a license. And now you're introducing kind of school back to this person and studying back to this person. And if it's not something you were ever confident or comfortable with, it can add a lot of extra pressure to this process and to getting a job. So sometimes the deadlines are really strict, and I understand why they would be that way. And sometimes they're a little bit more relaxed and lenient, and that works too. But a lot of times somebody comes back into this, they're probably never worked in insurance before. So a
Mm.
lot of the terminology is foreign to them. And then they have to sit down and dedicate some time every evening to study on top of going to work during that day, whether it's at this new captive agent job position or it's maybe at a current position. And then once they get their license, then they're able to come on board. So there's a lot going on kind of outside of just, hey, sit down and study and you need a 70% to pass. And that number changes throughout the country as well. So I think there's a lot of external factors that can kind of weigh in. Somebody's confidence, maybe potential learning disabilities, maybe a quiet place to study is not available to them. Maybe they don't have a computer. So it's kind of case by case on why this can be difficult for some, and others, they show up and within 48 hours in some instances,
Yeah.
they're licensed and ready to go. So it can be quite frustrating from a manager point of view to have such wildly different results and situations that they have to deal with every day. So,
That's a really good point. I never thought about that. Is that some of these team members have been removed from an academic atmosphere for a while, and all of a sudden now they're thrust into an academic type of deal. I didn't like school, Mike. I went to Bible college, by the way, if you can believe it or not, and
oh, I believe it.
primarily because I didn't want to take math. So I guess they don't do math in the Bible. But I remember that when I graduated, and I'm talking about I just barely graduated college, I walked out. I said, I will never, ever go to school again. And I'm sure we've got other team members who are just like that. They didn't think that they had to go back to school for anything. And so now they're thrust into this thing. Then you brought up another really good point, which I thought was really insightful, was that you don't know what's going on in their personal life. You don't know what's going on at home. And those are contributing factors.
Yeah, they're big. You just have to be sympathetic with people and kind of what they're going through, but you also have a business to run. So kind of setting some deadlines and some guidelines, I think is very healthy for everybody involved. But what I tend to do is encourage managers to maybe give the student the benefit of the doubt a little bit. And kind of, as long as you have this structure in place, then you can kind of trust that maybe they are right for the job and they need a little bit extra time and attention, or maybe they're not right for this position and they can't get through licensing. So we tend to try to hold the hand of the student as best we can. And I think that makes a big difference for these people when they're on their own studying in the evening. So.
Yeah. No, okay. Now you said that, and I want to ask you about that. Do you find that most agents allow their team to study during work hours, or do you see most of them making they have to study after they get off?
It's hard to say if there's an exact split 50-50 or something like that. I will say that some agency owners make it mandatory where you're studying in the office for 1 week. That generally speaking gives them about 40 hours of study time available if they're going to study throughout an entire work week and then go sit for the exam. In theory, that's more than enough, and it should work for them. Other agents don't want to pay somebody to be on staff just studying for an entire week. That is expensive. And so they'll say, look, once you get your license, then you have this offer available. And in that instance, it's kind of up to the student to set time aside. If they're not working, so obviously sounds pretty easy for them to be able to kind of get some time together. But again, they could have a family, they could have a bunch of young kids at home, and it's not quite as easy as we might be laughing about here. In other instances, they'll have a full-time job or even a part-time job. And so then studying in the evenings is kind of their only option. So
Yeah. I mean, I think about my family. I got a 17-year-old and a 3-year-old. I know what you're thinking. I didn't plan that right, and you're correct. We did not plan that right. But I have a 3-year-old, and when I get home, she's not letting me do anything. I am her jungle gym, and so you got some team members that probably are like that, and it's just tough to do it at home. So maybe you ought to think about designating some time in your office during the day, whether it's a full day or half day. Let them study, let them get some quiet time. Again, you want to make their first big win easy, right? So and we're going to actually give you some tools here in a minute to help that. But let's talk about the team member that fails, Mike. Tell me, again, I know you talk to them all the time. Do you find that team members, and whether these team members have come to excel after they've already failed and they need training materials, or some other situation, do you find that a failure rate is like a lack? Do you find it's more, is it a lack of studying or maybe a lack of quality training materials? Tell me some things that you've seen that often contribute to a team member kind of failing their test the first time around.
Yeah, I'd say there's two factors, and you kind of hit them both on the head. I wouldn't say a lack of quality study material. I think there's a lot of providers do a great job of providing information. Where it gets tricky is these exams change, and they change fairly often. Some of them change every 6 months to a year, and some of them are updated a little bit longer than that as far as kind of out of date content. So what I would say is, kind of 1A would be a student being able to study and follow the study path from a provider, and they don't do that. So they need to put more time in. They need to take more exams. They need to spend more time with terms and topics that they'll see on the exam. We know those terms, and so we put them out there in kind of an outline format, really easy for the students to identify. But a lot of times, and first, it kind of falls to the student that they didn't put in enough time and effort. The second thing would be using out-of-date content. And again, I'm not saying it's bad content. I'm just saying it's out of date, which in turn kind of makes it difficult to apply to the exam. So a lot of times what I'll hear when students are struggling is, oh, I just downloaded some stuff from online, or I got a book from my manager that they had in their office. And then when you do a little bit more digging, you realize that book is maybe a year, 2, 3, 5 years old. And so all of a sudden that state law is no longer applicable because things change. Now you have a student that's been spending all this time studying the out-of-date content. They might know it really well, but those questions aren't anywhere to be found on that exam. So first and foremost, does tend to fall to the student and not following that study path. But after that, it could be factors like out-of-date content or just kind of a misunderstanding on something. So,
yeah. Which licenses do you see they fail more than the others? Again, the folks that I talk to every day, they seem to fail financial services a little bit more than PNC, but then I've heard it the other way too. So what have you seen?
So I would argue that the financial services exams are definitely more difficult than any of your insurance exams. So in my mind, I kind of rank the hardest exams would be like your Series 7 and your 65. Those are probably 1 and 2 as far as the most difficult. Some would put the SIE up there as well, which is kind of your prerequisite to be able to sit for your Series 6 or Series 7. That was introduced in 2018. So now you have 2 exams that you have to pass to hold a Series 7 license, 2 exams you have to pass to hold a Series 6, whereas prior to that, it was just 1. So those have gotten more difficult if you look at it from that standpoint. You also have 2 exam fees that you have to pay. So a little bit different there as well. I would say that the life and health exam is probably the easiest one to get through. And then if you wanted to go single lines, just life only is pretty simple. After that, then I would say the P&C is a little bit more difficult with some more moving parts than comparison to the life and health. So both of those, however, are much easier to get through than a securities or FINRA license, but still difficult for some, especially if you haven't been in school for a while. And these are all, like I said earlier, brand new terms and topics. So.
Yeah, I always wonder if states are trying to like trick the ones taking exams. I always wondered that. I know you can't answer that, but that's kind of my thought. Like, do states want people to pass the exam? Are they trying to trick them up, or do they really care about the content? I know you probably don't know their intentions, but that always runs through my mind because we want our team members to make the first big win easy, but I don't know. I always wonder about that. That's kind of a side thought.
Side thought, I would say, I mean, based on that, I can't say too much. Again, I don't know too much about that. I will say though, some states are harder to get through licensing than others, and they are kind of structured that way intentionally. Some states have timers that students have to meet, like California, for example. They have to actually sit at the computer and log 52 hours of time. Our system counts that time, monitors it, and then apply it towards the exam. Other states like Texas or Arizona don't have a pre-licensing requirement. So you technically don't need to spend as much time in a course to go and sit for that exam, but it's obviously still pretty beneficial for you to be prepared for it. So I wouldn't say the exams are structured to be more difficult in other areas, but sometimes the process being just different across the country can make it seem like it's more difficult to get licensed in one state versus another. So.
Yeah, that brings up a question that I just don't know it. Maybe it's an obvious question for our listeners, but if I've got an agent who's licensed to sell in multiple states, do their team members need licenses in each state?
It depends on what you want that team member to handle. Again, we always defer students and managers to speak to the DOI in their respective state, and they will answer that question for them. But you can apply for a non-resident license. I'm sure everybody here listening is aware of this process. A lot of times, if you're having staff, then it's kind of up to you if you want them to apply for that non-resident license in other areas. They do become more valuable to you, but there's sometimes some extra fees affiliated with that. So.
Yeah, it's good. I guess probably one thing that all of our listeners know. I just don't know it because I'm not an insurance agent. I am not licensed in anything. I mean, I'm barely licensed to do what I do now. So it's just good. It's just good to know. So, well, let's talk about getting them their first win because this is about success. We're going to turn to the positive here. And let's talk about Excel specifically. How does Excel come in and help with the licensing process? So take a few minutes, if you don't mind. Walk us through what Excel provides, how it can help agents get their team members licensed. Maybe it's more expeditious. Maybe it's just better training. But at FrontRunner, we're a big fan of Excel. We've seen lots of organizations that utilize your services, a lot of agencies that utilize your services, and there's just success stories all over the place. So give us a quick walkthrough of what Excel provides and the team member training, and the team member licensing piece of it. How does it help them play well?
Yeah, well, I think one of the major differences with Excel compared to some of the others kind of starts with the people. I am the most junior sales rep on this team, helping accounts, and I have 11 years of experience in this industry. So I think that says a lot. We have people that have come from different pre-licensing brands to come over here and work together. Everybody here is really passionate, first and foremost, about helping students get through this exam. My story to get here is a little bit different than most. I, like you, Adam, kind of struggled through school, and here I am kind of working with people to get through schooling classes. So it's a little bit different, but I think because I had so much trouble with my own schooling, it does kind of help me to sympathize with students that work through stuff. So I would say first and foremost, it's the people. That's kind of one of the biggest differences. I would say second would be the organization of the material that we lay out for students. I think that is kind of an underrated perk of us. It doesn't get spoken about very often, but I think it's a big help for these students. And what I mean by that is with some providers and some of these topics, it can be really difficult and really intimidating to get through it. For example, with a life and health license, annuities is a very difficult subject to get through, especially if they're brand new to this world. And
Right.
some of these providers will give you that chapter, that section of the content pretty early on, and kind of weed out a lot of students because they can't make it through that part of the course. So, for example, if you're only 12% of the way through this pre-licensing and you get to something that's really difficult, really intimidating, all of a sudden that other job offer just sounds a lot better. And so it's pretty
Yeah.
easy to walk away from something. If you get to that annuities chapter and you're 70% of the way through your course and you're feeling pretty good about how these terms are working for you and how your test scores are doing, and all of a sudden you hit a more difficult section, it's really hard to walk away from something when you're about 70% done. So it's also not as difficult at that point because you're familiar with these terms and concepts. You've been working with them through these other chapters. It all kind of fits in a little bit nicer. So I think the order of our content really kind of builds confidence for these students as they're working through it. That would be a big one. Our exam questions are great. I don't ever get feedback from a student where they fail their state exam and they come to me and say, hey, nothing that I studied was on that test. That does not happen. A
Yeah.
lot of times it's, hey, I failed, Mike. I'm sorry. I know we were working on this together, and I know exactly what I did. I second guessed myself on these couple of
Yeah.
answers. I changed my answer, and I failed with a 68 or a 73 or whatever their passing mark is. They were just below it. A lot of times, just a little bit more help with these students, maybe talking to an instructor, will then kind of push them through. So that kind of segues me into the next point, is access to instructors.
Mhm.
We have a learning center on our dashboard that will help these students to be able to reach out, whether they have questions about life and health content or property and casualty, and it's pretty accessible. So some providers make it a little bit more difficult to get a hold of your instructors or your just your contact people in general, and we kind of put them right there in front of you throughout the entire process. So those would be a few ways. A lot of times, or I'm sure what people are wondering about right now is kind of, I'm a manager. What type of access do I have?
Yeah.
And we have the ability to send daily tracking reports to each manager that'll show them a snapshot of their students' progress. A lot of times that's more than enough to help them out. We also have a portal where you can go in and say, hey, look, this is great. It shows me that so-and-so is 50% of the way through the course in the first couple of days, but I want to see how many times they took these exams. And they can dig into all that through their admin portal. We had an update take place towards the end of last year, September of 2024. And with that, we were given another ability that was kind of only reserved for your largest IMO companies, companies that enroll hundreds of students a day in our platform. And we've kind of rolled that feature out to the smaller agent that might only hire one person a year. And that's the ability to set up custom reports. So now if you say,
Yeah.
hey, this daily report is really helpful and handy, but I'd like to receive a report on Friday afternoons that shows me every student that's 80% of the way through their course with 3 days left before it expires, you can build that report and it'll hit your inbox every Friday. It can include emails and phone numbers so that you can easily reach out to these students and stay in front of them as they're working through it. So a lot of features there to help. But I would say the people behind the company are kind of people that you want to do business with. So
Business with, well, and that sounds easy to me. So let me just make kind of, so I can kind of regurgitate this just so I have it. So I'm a captive agent. I got a new team member on board. I'm going to connect with Excel, sign up for the training course for that team member. They're going to get connected with you. You've got great people who are going to help guide them through the process. The material is ordered properly so that you maybe make some of the stuff a little easier on the front end, maybe some stuff that might be a bit more challenging, like annuities on the back end. And all this stuff is online, correct? So they can
that's
access it from anywhere in the world.
That's correct. Yep. You can access anywhere online. About half of our students or studiers study mobilely, right? So we are mobile compatible, and I want to say about 80% of those study on an Apple product, whether it's an iPad or a phone or something like that.
Yeah.
So we always encourage them to have a nice quiet place to study, but that's not always possible. So we are mobile compatible, and they can access it from anywhere in the world. So.
But it sounds powerful. You're going to take them step by step. You're going to even have the ability to tell their managers how far through the course this team member is. And it's
Look,
like,
Adam, people don't want to do this. Let's be real here, right? It is a requirement in about half the country.
Sure.
Students do not want to take this exam. They don't want to do continuing education. It's a requirement to be a part of this industry. And so we try to make that requirement as easy as possible. We'll hold their hand as much as we can. It does fall to the student and the manager in some instances that they need to be engaged, and these students need to be studying, but we try to make it as easy as possible. We give them links to their state DOI, their testing center. We give them a roadmap that will show them step by step everything they need to do, not just pre-licensing, but that includes, where do I go to schedule my exam? Do I need fingerprinting? How do I do that? We give them the roadmap to accomplish everything as easy as possible.
Yeah, I'm sitting here like, why would an agent not do this? And why would an agent, because I know of an agent who throws kind of a crusty old book on their desk and says, all right, you got 2 weeks or you got 3 weeks. And then that's it. They don't check on them or anything. I don't know why. Why is it that some agents don't choose a service like Excel? Is it a money thing? Is it they just don't know about your service? Because if I'm sitting here as an agent and I can set up that nice intentional atmosphere like we talked about in episode number 1, and then I can say, okay, now you're going to be joining up with the folks over at Excel and you're going to work through all of your training. Why do people not do this? Would be my question.
I think there's a couple of factors. I think what you had mentioned before, your square process is really helpful for a lot of people, but that also means that they're doing something the way that you did it. And if you came on and got licensed 20 years ago and used a provider that gave you a book and some printable practice exams, then that's kind of what you know. And there's nothing wrong with that. It worked for you. Why wouldn't it work for this student that you're bringing on board? But times have changed a little bit, and people learn different no matter how young or old you are. Everybody has a different learning style, and we try to provide tools to help them out. So I would say it really kind of falls to just making sure that people are aware that Excel is out there to help them out. We are pretty competitive with price, so that's never really a barrier to working with us. I would say it's just making sure that they know that there are people out there that specialize in pre-licensing and making sure that these students have what they need. So a lot of times once people give us a shot, they're going to have pretty good results and be pretty happy with it. But again, studying is different. Everybody learns different. And so that's kind of why somebody might make that choice or not know to give at least an online provider a shot to try and get in there and help your students more efficiently than maybe that old textbook that worked for you. So,
and the reason why we have Excel on To the Front, our tagline is tools for today's, for tomorrow's top agents. And so we're not going to put a tool on here that we don't believe in deeply. We believe that your time agents or managers is the most precious commodity you have. And why would you burn a bunch of your time taking your student through your new team member through, whether it's an outdated process or a manual process? Excel gives you the roadmap. It gives you everything you need to get that team member the best shot of being licensed quickly, right? We want to remember the big point here is to make their first big win easy. And what if your team member came into that space and it was organized well, it was very intentional, and you said, all right, now we're going to start your training. And we've got this really great company that we work with called Excel, and there's a whole roadmap that you're going to walk through. It sounds like an absolute no-brainer to me to do that. And so I'll tell you what in fact, I'm going to give it at the end of the episode, some ways that you can get a deal to sign up with Excel through FrontRunner. In fact, I'm going to throw that up right now. If you go to this website, partners.excelsolutions.com/frontrunner. In fact, if you're listening, not watching, let me spell that out. It's just partners.excel, XCEL solutions.com/frontrunner. Frontrunner. We're also going to have that in the bio of this episode. If you're a part of the Frontrunner community, we're going to have that a few times on our community page and on your portal. You're going to find that link as well. We'll also put it on some other socials because we believe in this, and you get a deep discount by using this link. Right, Michael? Right, Mike?
That's correct. And if any of you out there listening or watching here would like to be able to track the progress of your students, go ahead and reach out to us at Excel and let us know kind of how you heard about this podcast. And I'd be more than happy to get you set up with your own manager portal that will give you those daily tracking features. So we are here to help. The discount is always nice, but more importantly, I think you need to be there to support your students. And that's what some of these features allow you to do a lot easier. So.
That's right. And make their first win easy. Don't make it hard. Don't put a 20-pound book on their desk. Get them signed up. partners.excelsolutions.com/frontrunner. I'm sure, well, in fact, I know on that page is all the contact, everything you need to know about getting your team going. So, okay, now let me ask you one last question as we wrap up today. Tell me a success story, even if it's just one. Maybe it's an agent who had a team member who just couldn't get through, the studying wasn't happening, and using Excel, they got their first big win. Give us a success story that maybe warmed your heart or something that you remind yourself after a tough day.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to narrow down one, right? After 11 years of doing this,
Sure.
there's been a number of them. I have them from the IMO space where you've helped people get licensed that were kind of maybe in a really tough situation prior to this, couldn't really do anything else. And I had a friend that not my friend. This was an agent that had a friend that was in rehab and helped him to get out of that and gave him our products to start studying. And then I met this individual a couple years later, and they were doing fantastic. They loved it. They credited not only our course with helping them to kind of turn their life around, but this individual that opened up an opportunity for them to make money and make a difference and help people as kind of turning their life around. So that's one quick one. I mean, I have tons of stories like this where people that struggled in school and have tried other providers and really haven't had any luck turn to us and say, hey, look, I just need to get a couple more points on this exam, and then I can start working and making money to support my family. And we've been able to help them out with that. So I do think that there's a lot of examples out there with people that have kind of turned things around. It's hard for me to just highlight one of them.
Just one after 11 years. Give me your favorite. You're like,
a lot of
I have a
times,
favorite.
I really don't. I mean, I've met so many incredible people. I met an individual that studied for a very long time. They had a learning disability, and just kind of being able to process what they were reading was really difficult. And I ended up working with this individual for, I want to say, 6 months to kind of help them put everything together and then go and sit and pass that exam. Now, obviously, that's not an average time frame to study. A lot of people would have quit well before that. They had a personal situation which allowed them to kind of try insurance as a passion project to help some people, and they stuck with it and they got it done. And that was probably one of the more proud moments that I had as far as seeing somebody so driven that would be a great sales individual, but just was really struggling with the academic side of this. And once they finally got through, it was a big relief for everybody involved. So that would be another one where it's kind of been a big difference. So I'd want to credit that student's manager a lot too. They put a ton of time in, a lot more time than most would. But I do think it's nice to kind of think about, hey, how much revenue, how much can one of these people that once they are licensed generate for my company? How many people can they help? And I think it makes a big difference that putting a little bit of time into these students kind of really helps to turn things around for everybody.
Wow. You're not just giving a product. The cool thing is that whatever you're behind can be life-changing for people, just depending on what your motive is going into it. Man, I love hearing that. I love that because I've said it a lot on this podcast. I'm going to keep on saying it. So at the end of the day, we're going to leave this earth with nothing. It don't matter how much money you make, how many relationships you have, how much power. You're going to leave this earth with nothing. So what's the stuff that really matters? Well, what really matters is, did you make a difference in anybody's life? And so I love partnering with tools that do that. So thanks for sharing that story with me. Again, check them out, partners.excelsolutions.com/frontrunner. We're going to have the link in the bio and wherever you are getting this podcast. We'll also have it in the Frontrunner community on Facebook. Feel free to join us there. We're always talking shop, so you don't have to be a subscriber to Frontrunner to be a part of that private community. We're also going to have the link right there as well. Mike, any parting words for us as we wrap up the episode?
No, just thank you very much for having me on, Adam. It's been a pleasure working with you and knowing you over the last several years. And I'm looking forward to trying and get this message out and get these products in the hands of more people. So I really do appreciate you having us on here. If you guys ever need anything in the future, you know how to get a hold of me. I'm more than happy to help out. So thank you.
I sure do. Mike from San Diego, not from Arizona. Mike from San Diego, from Excel Solutions. Mike, thanks for being a part of the podcast today. Hey, you don't want to miss episode number 16 coming your way, and we're talking about Google reviews. Now, listen, I know I've got Reviewsy right here behind me if you're watching, but don't worry, it's not a big sales pitch on Reviewsy. We're actually going to talk to an agent, talk to a business owner who has over 800 Google reviews, and she's going to walk us through a process about how she got those Google reviews in a really, really short time. In fact, she has more than that. So I can't wait for episode number 16, where we talk about the power of a Google review, how to get more. Don't worry, it's not a big sales pitch for Reviewsy, even though we will talk about it. But this agent doesn't use Reviewsy, and she has an amazing process, and we're going to talk about the power of that on the next episode. So until then, thanks again. Again, thanks to my guest, Michael Aldini from Excel Solutions. We appreciate you coming on. And until next time, keep leading your agency to the front. Every day is worth it. Take care.